So my goal this morning is really to help educate about this new opportunity at Sonoma Clean Power, and really to spend most of the time talking with you about your questions and engaging on this, because this is new territory. This isn't something that we've had an option before. And so where I want to begin is really talking about a new kind of public agency. This isn't something that we've really had before. Sonoma Clean Power is a community choice program, and it adds competition, meaning that PG&E will still be competing for your business. We don't have you as a guaranteed customer in any way. You can choose to continue getting your power from PG&E. And also, we don't use any tax money. So this is completely funded from the bills that we get from our customers, and we don't either give money to the county or any of the cities from our programs, and we don't take money from the county or the cities. It is a truly independent agency. It was created by public demand. So back in 2010, there was a ballot initiative that PG&E backed at the time that was promoting this notion that communities should not be allowed to start up their own community power programs. And at that time, Sonoma County voted more than 2/3 against that ballot initiative, asserting our right to really run our own community power programs. And that sent a clear signal to us at the county and the water agency that were initially involved in this, and also to a lot of the folks who were championing this down in Marin, where the first one of these programs got off the ground. And so I think the best place to start this talk is really to tell you what we are not, and then I'll start diving into what we are. This graphic is really helpful for getting across this idea that we are not replacing PG&E. PG&E still has trucks, they will still drive around, they will still maintain all the poles and wires that you see, they'll even do all of the billing. All of that continues unchanged. So what really changes is that we are taking the part of the power industry that is naturally built for competition, and that is who's feeding power into the wires at the other end so that you can take it out at your house. And that part of the industry is really a good place for competition, because we can contract with a different type of power supplier with cleaner sources from hydro and wind and solar power, and we can turn off those contracts from natural gas providers, and we can put that power into PG&E's wires and rent those wires from PG&E, paying them full fare for that. They then deliver the power to you and to all the businesses in the county. So does anybody use, like Sonic is a local internet company, and there's some Sonic customers out here. Sonic does this with AT&T's phone lines. Sonic rents AT&T's phone lines to send your internet traffic over their phone lines. We're renting PG&E's wires to send our power over their lines. So it's a really similar model. The program is set up today so that everyone in the county can participate whose cities have voted to join. And so what that means is all of the cities are currently participating, including the unincorporated areas, including all of Oakmont. And then Cloverdale, Petaluma, and Runner Park decided to wait last year when the first round of voting occurred. They really wanted to see what the rates were going to be. And so just recently, we've invited those cities to reconsider and consider another round of voting by the end of this year. And Healdsburg doesn't really need us. They've got their own utility, they're doing fine, they produce a significant amount of their power with renewable energy, and their rates are about 20% lower than PG&E, so they're already in good shape. So really, Sonoma Clean Power is intended to serve the rest of the county, and then should Cloverdale, Petaluma, and Roanoke Park decide to come in, then those cities would also be served. But this is limited to Sonoma County. And customers are eligible in phases. So what that means is we didn't want to roll out service to everyone in the county on the first day, because our very small call center located in Santa Rosa would be overwhelmed. We wanted to roll this out in phases to train up our staff, to make sure we were answering calls efficiently, and to borrow far less money, because it takes some initial money to get this going. We're borrowing it from First Community Bank. I saw you have a branch down here at the bottom of the hill, the local bank. They're lending us up to $10 million to get this program off the ground. And what that means is we're able to start with a relatively modest amount of money. If we rolled out to everyone in the county on one day, it would take about $45 million. So it really reduces how much borrowing we have to do. So then at the beginning of next year, probably in February, we'll roll out to all of the remaining customers in all of those other cities. So the first 20,000 or a little more accounts are in phase 1. The next 120,000 plus or minus is in phase 2, and then any cities that are voting, the Cloverdale, Petaluma, and Roanoke Park, would come in at the beginning of the following year, or a little earlier probably. So what is this product? We're advertising that we have cleaner power at a competitive rate, and Steve set that up. Really, what this is a product that is 50% more renewable energy than PG&E has. And so what that means is they have 22% today, half of that is 11, so we're offering 33% renewable power right out of the gate, and we're offering it at a rate that's a little bit lower than PG&E's price today. And one of the questions we always get is, how on earth could a little tiny startup organization offer power that is cleaner at a lower price than PG&E? So I'll just hit that one right now, and if you've got more, we'll hear about it at the end. But the real reason is we have incredibly low overhead. I have 6 staff right now running the entire organization. We'll probably grow to the giant size of 12 to 15 over the next 2 years. And we don't have any equipment yet. We likely won't for many years. And we also don't have shareholders. The public is our shareholder, which means that any of the dividends that would normally flow from these kind of profits would actually go toward reducing costs to our customers. So the flyer out in the lobby I left, we printed up about 30 days ago, and it says our prices will be 2 to 3% lower. That was true when we printed the flyer. Now our prices are 4 to 5% lower because PG&E recently raised their rates. So one of the key things about our default service of Clean Start is that our rates will only be adjusted once per year. So that rate stability and certainty is one of the key goals that we were set up to achieve. PG&E adjusts their rates about 4 to 10 times a year, depending on circumstances, and one of their biggest rate changes comes in May 1, the day that we start. So just comparing power sources, Clean Start is 33% renewable, but we also have 37% hydropower. And hydropower is not called renewable in the state of California, even though there's no greenhouse gas emissions from hydropower. And the reason for that is that you can't build more large dams in the state of California. And that's probably for a good reason. We don't really want to flood more beautiful river valleys. But we want to build more solar, wind, geothermal, and small stream hydro. And so those are considered renewable sources. And so there's a distinction in state law. Both of them are carbon-free, and so both of those are considered preferred resources in Sonoma County. If you compare that to what PG&E is offering as a preferred resource here, they are at 33% preferred today, but they do get credit for that nuclear when it comes to estimating greenhouse gas emissions. So we've decided that we're not using nuclear power, at least in the first few years of Sonoma Clean Power, and probably ever. We certainly haven't adopted a policy on that yet, but it's something that we haven't heard any interest from folks in the community to really dive into nuclear power. So PG&E's forecast for their greenhouse gas emissions in 2014 is 412 pounds of carbon per unit of power, and ours is 283. And so at 31% lower emissions, we're coming out of the gate with a much cleaner product at about 4 to 5% less for all of the customer types. So we're really happy to be able to offer a cleaner product at a lower price. And one of the most exciting things is PG&E is watching this very carefully. In fact, is there anyone from PG&E here today? They often come to talks. They're watching this, and what's really wonderful is they're stepping up. So they're talking about offering a greener product as well. They want to get you back as a customer as well. So really, that was the point of setting up this program in the first place, was to change the marketplace, make hello, we have a director here of Sonoma Clean Power. I'm sorry, I didn't see you sneak in. Susan Gorin is chair of Sonoma Clean Power.
Hello, everybody.
And I'll cue you in a second here. So we have really been working closely with PG&E even to talk with them about how we might compete so that all of our shared customers benefit. And that's really exciting because that's where this transformative nature of the program really gets some traction. So I wanted to also talk a little bit about a very special product called Evergreen. This is something that hasn't been tried in California before. This is a new idea, and it's something that I really want to encourage each of you to think about. It is 100% renewable, that's been tried, but it's also entirely made in Sonoma County sources, which means this is from local producers of clean power. So we're starting with the Calpine Geysers facility at the north end of our county, and we'll be adding other resources to that mix as we can. So local solar and other local sources of power. And this is for a 3.5 cent per kilowatt hour premium. So on a typical single family home, that's anywhere from $10 to $20 a month extra over our Clean Start product. And this is interesting enough to us, and because the customers of this program pay their whole way, we're offering this early. So anybody can actually jump in line. You don't have to wait for your phase. You can call us up, you can get on the website, you can sign up for Evergreen Power. So I'm really excited about the idea of seeing how many people embrace this idea of local power. And very, very clean, no emissions at all. This isn't really a slide to read, it's just to show you the 3 options on our website. The Clean Start option, Evergreen, and opting out. So opting out is what it's called if you want to stay with PG&E. And that option, we wanted to put it front and center because really, we'd rather have your trust than your business. We're in this for the long haul. I want to be able to look back 10 years from now and say, we rolled out an honest program, people understood it, anybody who wanted to stay with PG&E did, and could easily figure that out by clicking opt out. And maybe some of those people will reconsider over time, and they'll think about investing dollars back in Sonoma County and supporting renewable energy. So a few more slides, and then we'll turn it over to some Q&A, and I'd also actually ask our board chair to come up and say a few words as well. Solar energy is something that's very important to a lot of folks in Sonoma County. We have more solar installed per capita here in Sonoma County than in any other county in the United States. That's really great. It's an incredible place to be. And what's amazing is that's only about 7,000 households. And we've got well over 200,000. So we actually could do more. And we could do quite a bit more. And so a lot of what we're looking at is how do we encourage more solar energy in the right places, and especially on rooftops and parking lots. And one of the areas that we looked at was by leveling out our net metering program. So does anybody here have solar on a house? We do, that's great. It's like 6 or 7. Solar is done where you attach it to a meter that actually can flow in both directions. So when you're using more power than you're producing, your meter runs forward. When you're producing more power than you're using, it actually spins backwards. And then that net amount is called net energy metering. So we offer a 1 cent per kilowatt hour premium payment on production. And the reason we do that is our rates are lower. If we didn't offer that, then when you were making extra, you would be credited at our retail price. And then you would get a little bit less than if you were getting credited at PG&E's price, which is higher. So that just levels things out so that it's an even playing field. The real benefit of our net metering program is that our credits don't zero out. And what that means is, if you finish your year and you've made a little bit extra, right now you don't get compensated for that. Or if you do, it's at the wholesale price, which is very small, about 4 cents. What we'll do is compensate you at the retail value of that power, which can be as high as 22 cents. So it's a significant benefit for somebody who's sized a solar array so that it meets all of their financial needs of their home or their business. And we'll pay that out if it's over $100, or just roll it forward as a credit for the next year to carry forward. The last really key point is that programs that are currently offered by PG&E and other providers in our market will continue. So there's no change in reliability because PG&E maintains the grid. There is also no change in programs. PG&E currently today collects money from all of the ratepayers, and they use that to run efficiency programs and incentives and rebates, and they use that to pay account representatives to help the business community figure out their bill, and all of those programs will continue unchanged. So anybody who's participating in one of those programs or getting those incentives can continue doing that because we'll still be paying those charges. We'll still pay PG&E for delivering power and that fee for program support. So it's also important to note that Sonoma Clean Power will produce at least $6 million in bill savings over the next 12 months. And that's money that goes right into your pockets. So that's money that flows back into our community, and you can do do with it what you will, but that's an immediate return to our economy. So we're keeping it simple. PG&E does all of the billing. We put a line item on their bill that replaces their generation charge. So remember, we do power generation, they do power delivery. So we take that line item that they used to have that said generation, and we replace it with Sonoma Clean Power generation. So the low-income rates, the medical baselines, any subsidized rates that exist today continue without change. And again, no change in reliability. They're doing the wires. They're maintaining everything in an outage. If there's an emergency or a tree goes down on a line, it's still them who we call. So I wanted to show you in the upper right corner of the bill, if you can zoom in a little bit, that account number in the upper right corner of your PG&E bill is how you take an action with Sonoma Clean Power. So if you want to opt out and stay with PG&E, you can do that. It's those first numbers before the dash. Type it into a website or call us up at our 800 number, and you can do that. That's also how you would sign up for Evergreen. So if you want to sign up for Evergreen, you'd use those numbers in that upper right corner called your account number to take that action. Importantly, and I want to underline this, if you don't take any action at all when your phase comes up, you will be enrolled in Clean Start. And what that means is it's an opt-out program. I want to underline this because there's some confusion about this. So if you get a letter in the mail, and you'll get 2 before things start and 2 afterwards, and you don't take any action at all, then you'll start moving forward with our cleaner product at a little bit lower rate called Clean Start. The reason it was set up that way is that the federal government back in the 90s actually issued a requirement to the states that they make as much of the electric market competitive as they can. And there's certain parts of that market that don't make any sense to make competitive, like stringing wires to your house. You don't want 5 sets of wires to your house. That's a natural monopoly. That makes sense to have 1 set of wires, 1 meter on your house. It doesn't make sense to have only one company able to fill those wires with power, because those wires go out across the entire western United States, and if you have a power plant somewhere in that location, you should be able to contract for and deliver power into those wires. So that was the aspect the federal government in the 90s really emphasized. In California, it was 2003 that our state adopted legislation supporting community power and encouraging community power. And really what that did is it made community power systems the default provider. It said any utility is going to have to step up their game and offer a really truly competitive product if they want to keep that part of the business. So that's really one key part. There's that generation charge showing as a line item on the bill. And that really concludes the key part of my talk. Before we go to questions, I wanted to ask Susan Gorin, who's supervisor of the First District, thank you, to come up, watch your step please, and just say a few words. Thank you.
I am so pleased that all of you are here today to help you understand what Sonoma Clean Power is all about. And the only thing that I would add to the great presentation that you just heard is that I frequently am asked the question, why? Why are we doing this? Why does this make sense for us to do? Well, the first answer is I remember when I was the mayor of Santa Rosa, and we appointed a green building committee to evaluate how we move forward on making our community slightly more renewable and sustainable. And the committee just sort of went off track, and they came back with a number of recommendations. But at the top was really looking at what we call, which is a jumble of words, community choice aggregation. And community choice is really why we are embarking on this. The Board of Supervisors, before I was elected or sworn in, decided that this is what we were going to do. We are going to try to convince the cities to join us in this endeavor. And in the last year, we actually have done so with 5 cities, and now we're, as Jeff has said, working with the last 3 cities, and so far it looks somewhat promising. And we have representatives from all of the cities who are members, and 2 representatives from the Board of Supervisors. And as Jeff has said, I am now the chair of Sonoma Clean Power. It is exciting. Many of you have been involved in a startup organization, and you understand the challenges and the intricacies of starting an organization from the ground up. The employment policies, the staff hiring, the hiring of our excellent CEO, a guy who has worked in Sonoma County on sustainable issues, lives here, understands who we are, and you are represented by, 8 board members, 2 from the Board of Supervisors, 2 from Santa Rosa, and another 3 from the other cities. So if you've received a notice in your PG&E bill, notice of rate increase, do you ever say to yourself, oh, I am never going to be able to have an impact on PG&E? Well, I got to tell you, you can have an impact because you have 8 locally elected representatives serving as the board of directors. In fact, I'm one of your neighbors. I just live right up the hill. You can contact me anytime you want. I would encourage you to stay a member with Sonoma Clean Power. In fact, I just received my PG&E bill. I'm going to be starting and signing up with Evergreen. So I'm looking at that account number on how to do it. I didn't receive one of the magic letters that said, you're going to be enrolled this year. Has anybody in the audience received one of the letters? Yes, a few people. Good. So hopefully you got some information here that help you make the decision about where you're going. But again, it's about local choice. And it's about doing the right thing for our community and our climate. So thanks.
Thank you. I think I'd love to open it up to some questions and anything that people have. And let's see, I think our microphone wranglers will be the choosers of who's answering the question. Yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Jeff, for the presentation. Did you read yesterday's letter in the Press Democrat by this guy, George Johnston?
Yes, I did.
You did read it. So you're aware that he feels very strongly, I don't know whether he's connected with PG&E or not, but anyway, he feels very strongly that we should not participate in, Sonoma Clean Power. So I was wondering how you felt about that letter and, what you might comment about it.
Thank you. So there was a letter in yesterday's Press Democrat, and the letter was quite critical of our use of taxpayer money, which we don't use, quite critical of our taking of customers from PG&E, which of course we don't actually take. You have the right to use PG&E if you wish, and was quite critical in a number of other points, I couldn't find anything that was factually accurate in his letter. And so we will be responding. It's unfortunate that somebody took that harsh of a criticism who's never spoken with me at all, and as far as I can tell, hasn't showed up to any public meetings either to make his points clear. It's wonderful that we're doing lots of these events, because this is where, and in fact, we're doing a lot with PG&E. We co-present with PG&E quite frequently now. I've now done 5 in the last just few weeks, and we're doing more of that because that's where it's, pardon my French, but no bull session. You get their view, you get our view, and you can hear it both right in the same room. And so what I would encourage is anybody who has any real questions about how this works can show up to a public meeting and ask questions, and can even talk to PG&E about how this works. So I'd really encourage some honest thinking and communication about that. Someone in the back. Yes, sir.
If there's a huge storm with multiple power outages, isn't PG&E going to give priority to fixing their problems before they fix yours?
No, because you actually will still be paying PG&E 100% of the money it costs them to repair outages and repair lines and maintain things. So that part of the bill called distribution charges is actually the majority of the bill. We're looking at taking a minority of the bill called generation and using that to buy from cleaner sources. So because you're paying 100% of all the costs for all of their employees throughout their entire company, they still have to provide the same level of service to you. Power generation is something that PG&E doesn't do much of. They actually don't generate very much power themselves. They go out to the market to buy power from other providers, just like we do. So actually, that distinction is really important. On top of that, and to maybe add to that, the Public Utilities Commission is really the gatekeeper. If anything ever did happen that was unfair along those lines, PG&E would be liable for charges. And as we've seen, sometimes they grow a spine and actually do that kind of thing.
First of all, I applaud your efforts. In the long run, short run for that matter, you rent from PG&E, their wires and so forth. What kind of contract over time do you have, protection over time do you have, as far as controlling those rates from PG&E?
So we control, well, let me back up. We have an unlimited right on time so long as we pay the charges that the Public Utilities Commission establishes for renting those wires. So just like the Public Utilities Commission establishes a rate for Sonic to rent AT&T's wires, it's the same body, in fact, that does that. They also establish a rate for us to rent from PG&E. And that rate is higher than I would like to pay. It's actually rather considerable, about 15% of the total electric bill. It's a very steep fee for doing that, but it's the kind of thing that's set by a third party, a neutral third party. And because of that, I feel like we have a fair hearing in front of them for not gaming that in the future. But we're watching it, no doubt.
What is to stop PG&E from going all renewable themselves, or going as much renewable as you are, undercutting your rates and putting you out of business?
Nothing. And isn't that wonderful, right? Because the point of a public agency is to serve the public. If we get to a point where PG&E or anyone else is providing a better service for cheaper and doing it long enough and committed to it long enough, then why do we need to exist? We don't. Because the public is being served. So really, that's actually one of the most exciting aspects of working for a public agency. First time in my life, I've been a private sector guy my entire life. I don't have shareholders I have to grow and grow and grow. I don't have to produce a profit. So really, the goal here is to serve the public, provide that cleaner power, keep the prices competitive, and if they beat us at our game, you win. We all do.
I get a medical discount for a problem I have. Will I continue to get that?
Yes, and you won't need to reapply either, so that continues without any change. And same with any other discounts, so low-income discounts and other types of discounts as well.
My understanding is that PG&E may face extensive penalties from the government for inactions or whatever, misactions in the gas explosion, and this may come to tens or over $100 million possibly, plus whatever suits come out of it. Does enrolling in your program in any way protect us from the costs that may be passed on to consumers?
Well, there's two parts to that question. The first part is no. Enrollment in Sonoma Clean Power is a separate action from anything that's going on with PG&E's lawsuits. The second part of that action, though, is, or that answer, is that PG&E likely will not be able to take money out of ratepayer funds to cover any sort of criminal aspects of a settlement. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to say that as a fact, but that's what has been reported to me in the newspapers and by others in the industry. And so what that would mean is it would have to come out of shareholder money for any kind of settlement.
I've heard one of the charges is that when you purchase the power from Constellation, I think it is, that it's based on largely energy credits or clean power credits, but I've never heard that explained. So could you address that issue, please?
Sure, yeah, so we're planning on buying about 11% of our power mix from out-of-state renewable sources that are referred to as renewable energy credits. And the reason why that credit system was established is, does anybody remember back to the 90s and the early 2000s when you could pay somebody to plant trees in Malaysia to help the climate? They were called green tags or credits or other types of tools like that. There were some scams around that where people weren't actually planting trees, or they were planting them and then harvesting them. It was a very unregulated type of way of helping the climate. And so Sierra Club, the Environmental Protection Agency, and a number of other organizations got together on a national level and created the idea of a renewable energy credit to support the purchase of renewable energy from sources somewhere far enough away from you that it wouldn't make sense to transport the power over the wire because there would be enough losses over that long distance run that it would actually produce more heat and not produce as much benefit. So what they did is they said, you can sell that power local to the producer and then sell it as if it were dirty power. So let's say I have a wind farm in Southern Oregon. I can sell that wind power locally in Oregon and call it natural gas power. So everybody has to report emissions associated with that power. And then buy natural gas power in the local market and call it wind power. Because we share a climate, the climate is exactly the same climate, reducing emissions over here produces a benefit for everyone. That's what a credit is, and it was set up to eliminate that kind of scamming system, so there was a third-party oversight that was set up to manage that. We only do that for about 11% of our power for the very clear reason that credits do not support California's economy, and they definitely don't support Sonoma County's economy. So we're minimizing our use of renewable energy credits as much as we can while providing a competitive price and steering toward more and more local sources so that we have less and less use of credits. So credits produce the same environmental benefit, but they don't produce any economic benefit locally. So that's really the truth of credits is they're not perfect. We'd love to be building everything we can here in Sonoma County, but because of price, we're doing some of that at the beginning. Does that help?
Yes, Judd Goodrich. According to the PG&E, half of their energy comes from hydroelectric and nuclear. Both of those are clean energies, however, neither of them emit carbon dioxide. And if you include that for PG&E, why then their total preferables comes out to 70% compared to 30% for clean energy. Now, why haven't we heard a peep from PG&E about this? You say you're having conferences with them.
Sure.
However, I understand that legally PG&E cannot answer these questions. Is this true?
So PG&E can answer factual questions, but they are not legally allowed to market against our formation, and that came out of what happened in Marin. So when Marin County launched a similar program back in 2010, PG&E engaged in a lot of unlawful practices. They spent $6 million marketing against the program and actually printed some things and had robot calls calling customers saying your lights would go out, which was factually inaccurate, and they were punished for that. And part of their punishment was that there was a bill passed called Senate Bill 790, and that bill prevents PG&E from marketing against the formation of a community power system because of the public good that these systems provide. And so it does restrain their marketing. However, they're perfectly welcome to, and we've stood up in the same room to answer questions about their power mix. This slide is theirs. This information right here comes from PG&E's own slides. And so their carbon-free power sources are considerably less than 70%. As they reported, 22% qualifying renewable, 11% hydropower, making up 33% of what's called renewable, 22% nuclear, so nowhere near 70% carbon-free, and that's on a forecast basis for this calendar year. So really, PG&E does report this. This is available publicly on their website, and you can call them up and ask them, and they'll report these exact same numbers.
Just a quick comment. I know there are lots of questions, and so keep raising your hand. We've literally got 40 more minutes for questions, so I think everybody will be able to ask the questions that they have. Please be patient with me. Thanks.
Yes, if we should opt out, I almost heard you say when we decide to come back in, we have to invest or pay something. How do we get back in?
Sure.
What do you have to do?
Right. So opting out during the enrollment period, so there's a period during which you're getting notices for the 2 months prior to when your service begins, in the month when your service begins, and the month following. That's called the enrollment period. And during that period, you can choose to opt out or sign up for Evergreen. You can do these things without any sort of fee or charge by either party. If you wait and you participate in Sonoma Clean Power for a while, try it out, and then opt out, PG&E requires that you stay with them for a minimum of 12 months. So they have you for 12 months. At that point, you're free to come back, and there's no charge by either party for that action. If you want to opt out, though, from Sonoma Clean Power, we do charge $5 for a residential customer after that enrollment period and $25 for a commercial customer after that enrollment period. And that's really to reduce our cost of changing the paperwork from one provider to the other. So it's not a significant fee, but be aware that there would be a $5 charge to your account. Just one time for opting out, correct? And there would be that fee would be waived if you do it while the notices are coming.
Right here.
Yeah.
So my question is about baseline. Are you going to keep the same baseline limits as PG&E?
So we don't have to. We have decided that as an initial starting point we should, because when we explored changing the baselines, it actually requires producing 2 complete sets of bills. And when we test marketed that on our own people, it was incredibly confusing. People had no idea what the bills meant and really how to understand them. So our first set of rates is adopted with exactly the same baseline numbers as PG&E. And the reason why you would have 2 sets of bills is there are baseline charges for distribution and there are baseline charges for generation. So it would require using 2 different sets of baselines. So it's an interesting suggestion, but tell me more.
That's another question. During high demand peak periods, where are you going to be producing that excess energy?
Can you repeat the question, please?
During high demand electric times and peak period electric times, where are you going to be purchasing the additional energy?
So our energy comes from, in fact, let's go back to this mix because it seems like there's a number of questions about this. So on the left, for the Clean Start product, we get 30% of our power from the marketplace, primarily from natural gas, and that's our fossil source today. The renewable energy Most of our peaking energy actually comes from the renewable segment and the hydropower, because those actually are designed, especially with solar power, to have a curve that matches a peaking curve roughly. The new peak in California, which means when most of the energy is being used, really occurs much later in the day than it ever has in the past. In fact, it's occurring at about 9 p.m. Right now. It's not occurring in the middle of the afternoon. So that's an area where hydro and gas is actually filling in the gaps right now. There are challenges in our marketplace where we want to still figure out how to use only renewable power at some point down the road. We don't want to have gas forever, but it's not an easy problem to solve because of that 9 p.m. peak. There's no wind at 9 p.m., it doesn't start until about 10 or 11, and there's no solar at 9 p.m. And so really what we have is the one resource locally in our county, which is geothermal, that we can use for that, but it's baseload. It's a very flat output from geothermal power. This is a facility that we can be really proud of. It's the biggest of its kind in the world. If you flush your toilet in Santa Rosa, it goes to a treatment plant, it gets fully treated, and then that water gets pumped up to the north end of our county, down into a dormant volcano. You with me here? It's really hot, turns into steam, the steam expands, that expansion runs a turbine, and that produces electricity. And it runs when the sun's not shining, and it runs when the wind's not blowing. It's a very good kind of resource, but it's not peaking power. It's base load, it runs all the time. And so the peaking power is mostly from hydro and gas at this point, and solar as well. In the back.
Okay, I'm maybe saying some things that aren't quite true, so correct me. When I think about the renewable energy area, and my experience goes back to the early 80s when I was dealing with cogeneration, okay, as a topic. What has happened historically has been that renewables cost more per kilowatt hour once they're established, and that it takes real commitment to pay that extra money to get the kind of large-scale renewable that you want. Okay, so now I look at what you're saying, go with us, our costs are less. I'm looking at that enormous 37% hydropower, which historically has been very cheap power. And then I'm looking at the credits that you were talking about a minute ago, which are historically cheap as well. What happens when you pay what we need to pay to get large-scale renewable? And again, if I'm incorrect on those factoids, please feel free to correct me.
Yeah, so in general, if you look backward through the last few decades, you're exactly correct. So really, renewable energy does require a higher level of investment on average than fossil energy. And so what we're excited about is the fact that that crossover point is not too far down the road. We get some benefit for sure by having low overhead and not having to pay shareholders, and that benefit allows us to do what we're doing. Get started, offer clean power at a lower price. That said, what's really driving the change in economics in renewable energy is international competition and an interest in solving the climate crisis. That interest of solving the climate crisis has pumped Germany to develop solar in ways that is not cost effective, but which began to transform the industry. It convinced China to support their solar industry and probably subsidize it, in which, again, was not a sustainable financial transaction, but which transformed the manufacturing of solar panels. So now today, what used to cost $10, $12, $15 a watt to install, we're now seeing for $2.50, $3 to install solar. It's considerably cheaper than it ever has been in the past. Solar is just one aspect though. So when we look at the trend of renewable energy, you don't have to look very far down the road before that actually probably crosses over the price point of things like even hydro and natural gas. And so that's what's really steering the big changes. There have been some sales of solar power that have actually gone through with deliveries in California for about $60 a megawatt hour. And just to put that in perspective, the cheapest you could buy solar just 4 or 5 years ago was about 90. So that's a 50% reduction almost, getting there. that's trending downward just in the last few years. And so that's something that is really changing the industry, and we get to ride on the fact that we don't have those shareholders and have low overhead while we get there. So the other factor is we're not, and our chair will check me on this, we haven't set a policy saying we're going to zero carbon. There is no policy that says we'll get there with Clean Start. It's an arrow, it's a direction. We need to move in that direction. But how fast we get there, whether we get there in our lifetime, is something that we get to decide and do on a financial basis and make sure it's financially viable. So I don't want to scare anyone into thinking that we're going out to build 100 megawatts of solar tomorrow and blow the price. Clean Start will always be competitive on price, and that's a commitment that we're making. Evergreen is something that's very different. Evergreen is a product where we feel freer to offer something at a premium because it's completely optional. Nobody even has to ever hear about it if they don't want to, but it's an optional program. Yeah. Yes, please.
That is really an excellent question, and it's something that the board is grappling with right now. And I want to comment on 2 points. One is our incredibly low overhead. Even with Jeff's projections about what this organization is going to look at, it's a very flat, small organizational chart of about 12 to 16, when we are at full capacity at the end of 3 years. Right now, I believe, as he said, we have 6 employees. That's in addition to you. We have a volunteer board of directors. We have appointed a business operations committee of 5. These are experts who live right here, experts in geothermal, solar industry, energy efficiency, and I'm probably missing a few more. A former employee of Agilent who is expert in business operations and planning. Also, we have a volunteer ratepayer committee, people who live right here, 4 representing residential and 3 representing commercial interests. So we are, and we're just now getting to the point of where we think we are going. May 1st is when we start flipping that switch for the first, providing for our first customers. And we're in the middle of, or at the beginning of, talking about strategic planning, about the energy mix, about the tension between rates and local production. And we are right now talking about how we want to use, excuse me, I have a little frog, how we want to use the revenues that we are generating through your ratepayer dollars. And I can tell you there will be a strong emphasis on creating some programs regarding energy efficiency, working with you to reduce the demand load of all of our buildings in the community. So I'm looking at a time where we won't need to provide nearly as much energy as we're providing right now.
I think I remember you saying at the beginning that Healdsburg's program is resulting in 20% lower prices, so what are they doing
A little bit lower than that, in fact. They're doing really well. So Healdsburg is a different kind of power agency. Healdsburg owns all their wires and all of those green boxes out in the grid. We don't. PG&E manages ours. Healdsburg actually does both sides of the power business in their market. So they do distribution as well as generation. So that gives them more latitude, but it also is the result of operating for many, many decades. They've been at this for, gosh, I don't know the year they began, but I'll bet it's close to 100 years. So they've been doing this for a very long time and have secured power cooperatively with other small municipal power agencies, that's the general term. And community choice is much more limited to the generation side. Yeah.
You showed wind power. Do we have any windmills here in Sonoma County? Will our coast be lying in our hills? We have these windmills all over?
So wind power, as you may be alluding, is very difficult to get a permit for in Sonoma County, even when it's not in a flyway for migratory birds, which is the big concern of a lot of environmentalists. And so as a result, I'm not expecting a lot of wind power, but the good news is I don't need to know in advance. We're relying significantly on the private sector and other public agencies to figure out what's best to build and where to build it. And the county permitting process will still be used, and the city permitting process will still be used. So everything we're doing will go through the normal environmental review. There's no shortcuts throughout any of this process. And, but I wouldn't expect to see a lot of wind power here soon, because it's historically had a much more challenging way of getting permitted. Solar's much easier to get permitted.
You mentioned that Marin County got an earlier start. Could you share with us any lessons that have been learned from the Marin experience?
Definitely. Go second. That's the first lesson. I say it in jest, but it's the truth. Marin had enormous challenges and difficulties because they cut the trail. There were regulatory problems, there were marketing challenges, there were competitive problems, as we talked about. But really, some of the things that we have been able to add to the Marin model that I think are important, in fact, one big one, Marin was able to figure out how to negotiate a power supply contract with a large company. In their case, it was Shell. And they managed to get a price that was fairly competitive. They started just a hair above PG&E, and today they're a little bit lower. That took them 3 years to get a little bit lower. And what we learned from that process was, don't use a negotiated process. Use a purely competitive process. And so when we went out to bid, we got 11 bidders and really stirred up the market as best we could. Then we actually went to the board and said, would you approve a set of retail rates that would allow us to contract with a wholesale provider and pre-approve those rates so that we can take the competitive process down to the last second, which meant nobody knew who was low bidder until it was the very last second when we opened the bids and said, okay. And when we did that, we actually had a process to refresh every hour until we liked what we saw. And we refreshed once, and we got a better price, and we signed it. And so that taught us a lesson about how to move through a public agency with full transparency, full oversight of what the rates are going to be, while still preserving a very private sector-like competitive process to say, if you're qualified, show me the number. Don't talk to me anymore. And that really, I think, is something we'll want to repeat, because that helped us secure some good pricing to begin with.
What form of communication will you use with your customers to advise them annually or periodically how you're doing on increasing your renewables and assuring them that the rates that they're paying are still less than what are available with PG&E?
We're actually working with PG&E to send out a joint mailer with both of our logos on it that shows our greenhouse gas emissions that we have both agreed is accurate and our rates, which we agree is accurate. Single piece of paper with both of our logos on it that's mailed actually from PG&E, not from us. And we felt that that was the only way that we could earn the complete trust of the customer base. And so we'll do that at least once a year. Well, as a regulatory process, we will do it once a year in July. But we will also post all that same information on the website, of course. The information will be available at our 800 number at our call center. And we're out here doing a lot of these talks. I do about 4 of these a week. We've so far spoken to about 4,000 people around the county. And we'll do another 50,000, I'm sure, by the end of this year. And so I think that's part of it as well, is just being out there discussing this and hearing concerns. Yes?
I believe you said, correct me if I'm wrong, that here in Sonoma County we have a good source of geothermal.
Yes.
And my question is, isn't geothermal cheaper than any of these other renewables?
Not yet. So geothermal is a really fabulous resource. The fuel cost is low because it's reclaimed water. And of course, it runs 24/7, it's running all the time. But it is still a modestly expensive resource to develop from scratch. So we were able to buy some power from the existing facility, and we've had conversations about whether or not they might want to expand and build new resource. It's beginning to look like geothermal might get a bit cheaper compared to fossil sources over time, and I can't tell you when that will happen, but there's still a small premium for geothermal right now. And it's a premium that, you know, is similar to a solar premium. It's not all that different than solar power. A little bit cheaper than solar in general.
Other questions?
This is good, we got a good crowd.
Okay, I hope I didn't sleep through the part that I want to ask about. Solar power and individuals, I'm sure everybody gets the flyers and people knocking on your door or whatever about getting solar panels and trying to put them on your roof. I don't know how much of it's done in Oakmont. My impression is that they don't want them to show and all of that. Now, how does that fit in for people that may already have solar power or would get it before everything would come through on this?
So anybody with solar power will get a small financial benefit. The bigger benefit that we're really looking for is to encourage people to build new solar power systems as well, to add to what we have. But there will be a small financial benefit for anybody who's got a solar array today. And importantly, one of the things that we're curing with this model is everybody who's put solar on a house or a business or anywhere has designed it so that they were absolutely sure it would never make one bit extra, because you never get paid for that. And so there's been this problem where people have built solar arrays that only provide 70 or 80% of their needs, because they didn't want to accidentally conserve or go away on vacation and suddenly give a gift back to PG&E. And so as a result, what we did is we set it up so that any extra you actually do make will be compensated at retail price. So you'll be made whole for any extra that you make. So what we're encouraging people to do is size solar so that it provides all of your financial and power needs for your home or your small business.
Yes, the public benefits charge is 5% of certain revenues of a utility, electric utility, are collected and are to be used for benefits to that utility, customers. Healdsburg, being a municipal utility, 100% of that 5% collected goes to energy efficiency programs and to the benefit of the customers in that community. Does Sonoma Clean Power collect that 5%, and does it then plow it back into its customers?
So PG&E actually continues to collect that for our shared customers, and we are working with PG&E to ensure that we get our fair share. And so there's several ways of doing that. One is by simply sitting down and having conversations about what they spend today. So we've begun that. The next step is to apply for some of that money through the Public Utilities Commission to run our own programs if there are gaps. And I want to underline this, PG&E does some things really well, and some of their programs actually work really well. And so one of the things that is new about our relationship with PG&E is that we're talking with them about driving customers into their incentive programs if they work really well. We want to find out what works for the public in Sonoma County. So we think there probably are areas where PG&E is not doing great. But we also want to take our time to figure out what exactly those are so that we're not accidentally just reproducing something that they already do well. There's no point in doing that. There's plenty of energy programs out there, but we want to make sure that whatever new programs we create are truly additional and valuable to the public. And so one of the things, in our last few minutes, if there are ideas about what kinds of programs would be interesting for you, we want to hear that. We've had a series of workshops to gain those kind of ideas from the public. We're still taking ideas. We will be likely for many years because we want to figure out what's most valuable to Sonoma County, residents, businesses, and government agencies, and nonprofits.
Other questions?
You know, there's been some controversy over smart meters. My guess is the same people who want dumb meters probably also want cleaner energy. Do you think that will be a problem for you in the future?
Well, we don't have any control over the meters. Those are PG&E's property, and they will continue to own them. So you know, we just simply don't have any control over that part of the power business.
A few years ago, there was quite a bit of controversy on renewable as to who controls it and actually whether some of the renewables were actually renewables or not, or whether there was a lot of cheating going on in areas of companies saying that there was a renewable, but it really was being sourced from some area it wasn't. How is that controlled, or how do you monitor that type of situation?
You're exactly right. So years ago, there was some very serious concern that people were selling green power that was not actually green. What's happened since, and it's been around for a little while now, there's a third-party agency that the entire western United States, southern Canada, and even part of northern Mexico use called, it's got a horrible name, REGIS, which is the Western Renewable Energy Generating Information System. It's a test, it's a pop quiz. REGIS is the third-party agency who all of the states, the 12 western states, refer to and say, have you verified the claim of a producer? So REGIS, if you're a producer, you have to have a qualifying meter on your output, and you have to measure the exact output of that plant, and it has to be certified, just like a gas pump is. There's a certifying agency that comes and spot checks that at random times, and they then certify the output of your plant, and then they allow you to sell only what went through that meter. You cannot sell 1 penny more into the market, and so that agency has done a good job of bringing up the game of trust in the power business.
Yes, I'm curious about your hydropower. We're not going to build any more dams, and I don't think they're going to get power out of rivers in California.
I'll repeat your question because I think the microphone's not doing a good job.
Okay, with your hydropower, 37%. I don't think we're going to build any more dams, and I doubt if we're going to get any energy out of these rivers in California, and they're going to be worried about the fish, et cetera, et cetera. Where are you getting all this 37%? You bring it from out of state?
Yes, so hydropower, normally when we contract for it, we would contract from as local a resource as we can comfortably get at a good price. So your question about, we're not going to build any new dams, we're not going to, damage river runs for fish, I think those are accurate. I think in California we have good environmental protection for a good reason, and what that means is we're looking for the high proportion as using existing facilities. And so today, because we're in a drought, we actually made a contract for power that could come from California, or in the case of a drought, fortunately we were thinking ahead, could come from the Pacific Northwest, where they have no drought right now. If you're up in Washington, you wish you had a drought right now. So because the Western grid, there's actually several grids in the United States, and the Western grid is the largest. It's a very large interconnected web of all the 12 Western states in southern Canada and northern Mexico. That grid allows us to put power in one side and take it out the other. The closer we get to putting it in and taking it out, the less freight we have to pay. We don't have to pay as much for the delivery charge because there's less wires between our generator and our use. And so that's one more reason to look at local sources and in-state sources over time. Right now today, because we've got a drought, not a lot of California resources for hydro to speak of.
Other questions?
Is there an expectation if the other cities come in that contractually we'll do better because we're, have more people? Can you speak to that?
Yes.
How many numbers do we need?
Yeah. So the program works very well at the size it is today. And so we have pricing that shows that we can deliver power at a good price. Having Petaluma, Roanoke Park, and Cloverdale come in would add value because now we'll be spreading the fixed costs that we have, so my salary and a few other staff salary, the office rent, a few other basic fixed costs of the organization over more customers. And that does help because we actually take out some of those fixed costs. Most of our costs are actually variable, which means almost all the money that we have to take in and put out is related to buying and selling power and paying PG&E fees. And that's far and away the majority of our money. So there's a small benefit, but it is there. And so I want to encourage those cities to come in for that reason, but even more so because then we'll be able to have bigger environmental impacts and bigger financial benefits for our county. That's really the big win. I think we're supposed to wrap up in a few minutes. One more, all right.
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused. If up in the Northwest there's hydropower to be purchased, can they sell infinite amounts of this hydropower, or do they only have so much of it to sell?
They only have so much, although what's strange is that in the spring, when the rain has been raining all winter, hydropower's price on the wholesale market actually goes negative. You are paid to use it because there's too much. And so that's the same with wind in Texas. Texas has installed so many windmills that wind power actually goes negative in Texas in the spring.
So if you were to need to purchase hydropower from Washington State, you wouldn't be concerned at all about the competitive nature of it. You would be guaranteed to purchase it.
Our contracts that we've set up for the phase one customers run for the next 3 years at a given price. So we know in advance, we've taken out all of the price risk for those customers. We will be buying new power on a regular basis for new customers coming in phase two, and for years following on that before we get to the end of that contract, so that we have price certainty. We don't want to ever be in a position where we have major risk on price at any time. We'll have some minor exposure to price changes in the market, just like PG&E does, but we'll keep it small so that any changes in price won't be dramatic.
My question was more about quantity, whether they would have enough to sell to any entity that wants to sell it.
There's a limited amount of power, but it's a bit like buying a car off a lot. If you buy somebody else comes in and makes another car to replace that car you bought. In the case of hydro, they're not replacing hydro with more hydro, they're replacing it with wind power and solar and other types of renewables. So there is a fairly steady flow of many thousands of projects getting built to meet those needs, but there's plenty of hydropower this year for sure in the Northwest.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.